A story from life with advice. Notebook in the kitchen. Laura stepped onto the creaking floorboards of the old house, as if she were transported to another era. The air was thick with the scent of dry lavender lurking in the folds of the old curtains and the faint smell of thyme on the yellowed wallpaper. The house, inherited from her great-grandmother, whose face was almost erased from memory, greeted her with the silence and whispers of yesteryear. Outside the windows, the surf roared measuredly, reminiscent of the proximity of the sea, whose coolness was barely felt through the thick stone walls. There was a story in every detail, as if invisible threads connected her to a woman she had never known, but whose presence was felt here most acutely. Tired of the inexorable rhythm of the big city, from the endless series of emails and car horns, Laura was looking for not just a change of residence, but a deep reboot in this move. Remote work allowed her to dissolve in the silence of a provincial town, where time passed more slowly, and the horizon did not rest on the concrete jungle. She imagined long walks along the shore, the sound of the surf instead of horns, and evenings filled with peace. Jake, her boyfriend, stayed in town, but promised to break this new silence every weekend with his arrival, bringing with him the familiar smell of his cologne and the warmth of his embrace. On the first night, as Laura began to sort through the old kitchen cabinets, which smelled of dust and herbs, her hand came across something small and hard, pushed into the farthest corner. It turned out to be an old notebook with a faded fabric cover. The dust flew off easily, revealing a faint inscription once made in ink: "If one day you are sad, open me." The letters seemed to have been written by someone's caring hand, as if they were not just a repository of recipes, but a personal message waiting in the wings. With a slight excitement, Laura opened the yellowed pages. Thin paper kept traces of time and culinary experiments, oil stains, crumbs of herbs, faded recipe notes. But it wasn't just a collection of culinary tips. Between the neat lines of recipes, written in an even handwriting, there were short phrases, like scraps of wise thoughts, belonging to a woman named May, her great-grandmother. Each note breathed warmth and worldly wisdom. The first note that caught my eye read, "If you want to keep love, learn to cook soup not out of resentment, but out of patience. Add a pinch of understanding and a sprig of forgiveness, and then even the simplest broth will warm two hearts." The words were simple, but they felt the depth of the years lived and the understanding of the fragility of human relations. Laura involuntarily pondered their meaning, feeling a slight tingling of conscience. A faint smile appeared on Laura's lips. She was just feeling a little annoyed that Jake hadn't responded to her morning message. Petty resentment was already beginning to take root in her soul, painting her thoughts in grey tones. But her great-grandmother's words, like a small voice from the past, made her stop and ask herself, is this hitch in correspondence really worth darkening the beginning of her new day? Didn't she too often let the little things overshadow the point? The next recipe offered to cook a pie with juicy summer peaches, whose fragrant pieces were presented on crumbly dough. And under it, like an unobtrusive addition, there was a note: "Do sweets when your soul is bitter. This will not solve the problems, but it will remind you that the taste of life is in balance. Sometimes a spoonful of sweets can bring back faith that good is yet to come." In these words sounded the comforting wisdom of a woman who knew how important small joys are in a series of everyday life. On a sudden impulse, Laura took the last peaches she had bought at the local market from the refrigerator and began to make a pie. The kitchen was quickly filled with a sweet, intoxicating aroma. She took a picture of the hot, ruddy cake and sent it to Jake. The answer came almost instantly: "It looks like a real summer. I miss you and these sunny days so much." With each new day, the old notebook became not just an accidental find for Laura, but a real companion and wise advisor. Each recipe, whether it was a simple omelette or a complex birthday cake, carried unobtrusive but surprisingly accurate advice. The words of my great-grandmother sounded like the voice of a loving woman who had lived a long and, probably, difficult life, and now shared her invaluable experience. Laura felt an invisible connection between the two generations of women in her family between the lines of the notebook. If it's quiet in the house, don't rush to turn on the music or fill the void with the sounds of the TV. First, listen to what your own heart is silent about. In this silence, you can hear the most important answers, which are drowned out by the daily hustle and bustle. This short sentence made Laura think about how often she had avoided silence, afraid to be alone with her thoughts. Laura began to notice that she was reaching for her headphones less and less as soon as she woke up. She began to appreciate the silence of the morning, broken only by the rustle of leaves outside the window and the cries of seagulls in the distance. In this silence, unexpected thoughts came, new ideas for work were born, and sometimes quiet tears rolled in, allowing the accumulated emotions to splash out. The silence turned out to be not emptiness, but a space filled with her own feelings and experiences, which she had previously diligently drowned out. One day, Jake came, as promised, for the weekend. Over a cup of fragrant herbal tea, prepared according to one of the recipes from the notebook, he noticed a shabby book on the kitchen table. Laura excitedly showed him her great-grandmother's favorite notes. Jake read a few sentences carefully, frowning thoughtfully, and said with unexpected seriousness, "This May can be trusted." It was as if she had looked into the very essence of things, as if she knew everything in the world. On one of the pages, next to the recipe for gingerbread cookies, Laura found another simple but deep truth: never cook on an offended heart. Food absorbs all your emotions, and instead of nourishing power, it can only bring bitterness and disappointment. You'd better wait until the storm has died down in your soul. Those words reminded her of how often she had tried to numb negative feelings by doing routine things, not realizing that she was transferring that tension to everything she touched. The evening of that day was not without disputes. The fatigue and misunderstanding accumulated during the week of separation resulted in harsh words. Instead of turning away and withdrawing into herself, as had often happened before, Laura, remembering the advice from her notebook, silently went to the kitchen. She took out the vegetables and began to slowly chop them for dinner. Soon, Jake approached, feeling awkward and regretful. He silently hugged her from behind, pressing his cheek against her hair, and this embrace became more eloquent than any words. If you want to be truly heard, don't raise your voice and don't try to outshout the interlocutor. Speak calmly and confidently, but only when you are ready to listen carefully in response. True communication is not a monologue, but a dialogue between two hearts. This phrase became a kind of mantra for Laura, a reminder of the importance of mutual respect in conversation. This simple wisdom gradually became her new habit. Instead of asserting her point of view, she learned to pause and give Jake a chance to speak. She began to ask questions, genuinely interested in his opinion, and was surprised to find that he began to open up to her in a new way, sharing his thoughts and feelings that he had previously preferred to keep silent about. Their conversations became deeper and more meaningful. On one of the last pages of the notebook, between the recipe for apple pie and notes on storing herbs for the winter, Laura found the following entry: "Family is not only a common table at which you gather from time to time. This is the ability to put down a spoon in time, to interrupt your story in order to really hear the person who is sitting next to you. This is attention to detail and readiness to support in any situation." These words resonated in her heart with warmth and understanding of the true value of close relationships. After 2 months of living in the old house, one evening, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea, Laura took an old notebook and wrote down her own recipe on a blank page, the recipe for the lemon cookies that Jake loved so much. And at the bottom, her hand trembling with excitement, she added, "Someday someone else will open these yellowed pages. Let him find here not only delicious recipes, but also a little warmth and love." She felt part of this continuous history, a link between the past and the future. Laura's house was comfortable not only from the appetizing smells of cooking dishes and herbs hanging on the walls, but also from those quiet thoughts and wise advice that she carefully kept in the margins of her old notebook and in her heart. She felt more and more clearly the invisible presence of May, her great-grandmother, who seemed to protect her through those yellowed pages, through simple words of care and worldly wisdom. And one quiet evening, hugging Jake over a cup of fragrant tea prepared according to the recipe from the notebook, Laura warmly thought that advice in life is like spices in cooking. Of course, you can live without them, but it is they who give each day a special taste, make life brighter and richer, filling it with wisdom and love passed down through generations.